to you all. It's really nice to see all of you. I want to start by just being very grateful to you because I know time in UQ is quite valuable, and for you to really find time to come for this seminar, it's really not it's not something easy. So we don't take that for granted for your availability. And just allow me to introduce myself. I'm not the speaker, but I have helped organize this seminar. And my name is Mary. I'm doing a Masters of Governance and Public Policy program in the School of Political Science. But before I came here, back home, I was interested in matters of corruption. I'm a prosecutor dealing with corruption matters. And with time, as I kept working, this issue of corruption has become a concern to me. And I've been just wondering, how can we help reduce corruption from our society? And my issue has been, is there a way we can be able to increase levels of integrity within our society? And not just necessarily by looking at the laws, because the law comes as the last resort when people have chosen to be corrupt and we have to punish them using the laws. So my interest and my concern has been, are there other more effective ways where we can encourage people to choose to be, to have integrity in their lives, as opposed to choosing to be corrupt? And because of that, I found myself talking and looking for people who have the same concerns with me. And in this university, I've been able to come across 2 members of the staff who have also an interest in this area. And they are really specialized in this area. They have done a bit of research, and they have also worked. They have work experience and also research experience. So I will ask you to allow me to introduce the 2 members of the staff, but I'll just get the information from the bag. I forgot to keep it. Sorry about that. I need to give you their details. So the 2 members of the staff are Professor Brian Head, if he can just raise his hand. He is going to be the respondent in this particular seminar. He's the one who will be responding to the main presentation given by the speaker. And Professor Brian Head is a research professor in policy and governance here at the University of Queensland. He joined the Institute for Social Science Research, Queensland Public Service, and he has been a Queensland Public Service Commissioner on 2 occasions in the 1990s, and later a research professor in integrity and governance at Griffith University. He has been involved in various intergovernmental policy negotiations, and he is the author and editor of several books on public policy and governance, including a recent edited volume titled Promoting Ethics, Promoting Integrity. Please give him a hand for being here. Allow me also now to introduce the speaker, who is Dr. M. Adil Khan. He's the one seated here. And he is the former Chief of Socioeconomic Governance and Management Branch of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, New York. And he's I don't know how to pronounce the name. Yes, adjunct professor at the School of Social Sciences, University of Queensland, Brisbane, here in Australia. For over 35 years, Khan has worked in diverse organizational settings that include government, academic, private consultancies, as well as the international organizations such as World Bank and the UN. Dr. Khan specializes in issues of global governance and national challenges, pro-poor development, participatory governance, public accountability, and corruption control. His competencies also include strategic planning and program evaluation, team leadership in complex multicultural settings,
global level policy advocacy, dialoguing and policy advice, network and partnership building, etc. In recent times, Dr. Khan has also been invited to participate as an expert in the UN's expert group meeting on climate change held in Korea in May 2009. Dr. Khan was awarded the 2005 United Nations Manager of the Year Award for his pioneering work in participatory governance at the United Nations. As a plaque for recognition for the United Nations Committee of Experts on Public Administration at the United Nations headquarters in New York in April 2008. He has traveled widely and has had working experience of exposure to more than 40 countries that include all the continents of the world. And he has published extensively on issues of governance, poverty, and evaluation. And he is the principal author of the 2008 United Nations World Public Sector Report titled People Matter, Civic Engagement in Public Governance. Khan also served during 1993 to 1997 as the founding editor-in-chief of the UK-based international journal Sustainable Development. He has a master's degree in economics, master's degree in social planning and development, and a PhD in political economy. He was born in Bangladesh, but he is a citizen of Australia, and he is married, and his hobbies include reading, writing, music, and cooking. Yeah, so please give him a hand. Yeah, so I'll proceed now to invite Dr. Adil to talk to us about this issue of corruption, and I just trust that we will enjoy it.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Mary, and also very warm welcome to the Sunshine State, as you can see the weather out there. This is not one of my formal presentations or a mandated presentation or a lecture that I'm required to give at the university. But I have been encouraged by Mary, and particularly her commitment to this issue of governance and corruption and all that. And in fact, in recent times, she actually undertook a very interesting initiative to form a sort of a group who could consistently work in the area of corruption control. And then a few days ago, when she approached me with a request whether I would be willing to make a presentation, I readily agreed, although with the caveat that my actual knowledge of corruption is very limited. It's not that I haven't seen many, but I have not been engaged in many. So I thought I would speak whatever I do from secondary sources. What I intend to do, and Mary probably already informed you, we have the structure here like I will first give my presentation, then Professor Brian Head will respond, and then we'll allow some time for question and answer. Then I will share with you a video of a case study from India. The case study is very interesting. It shows how community action at the grassroots level actually changed corruption and then contributed to major corruption control tools in the country as a whole. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I come to it. The way I like to proceed with my presentation is the following. First of all, let me clarify that corruption is nothing new. It's been with us for ages, for many years. It's been with us as much as in developing countries, also in developed countries. It is nothing new. Left on its own, people tend to be both good and bad. People tend to be both egalitarian, altruistic, and also greedy. So left on their own is often the greedy and the evil, they win. And so you need to talk about systems, you need to talk about institutional arrangements, checks and controls, motivation, etc., to control corruption. And that's something that I will demonstrate to you. But the most interesting thing is that in 4th century BC, there was this emperor, his name was Chandragupta Maurya, and he had a very scholarly finance minister whose name was Kautila. And at that time, according to this particular book that he has written, the name of the book is Arthashastra, which means the science of finance. And there he mentions at that point of time, in 4th century BC, there are about 14 different kinds of corruption that he discovered in India. And he said that corruption was so endemic in the whole society, it was like a fish. The way fish lives when in the water and constantly keeps his mouth open and closed and all that, and you wouldn't know which of these movements were for the breathing and which of the movements for drinking. In the same way, when in a corruption-infected society, people often don't know which one is actually a bribery and which one is actually a legitimate payment. Because often corruption gets legitimized, corruption gets part of the culture. So that's the kind of situation that we are often confronted with. So that's the backdrop. So it's nothing new, it's always been there, but when it comes to a level where it becomes intolerable, it affects our lives on a daily basis, just not morally, also economically, financially, that's when we have to start thinking about it. This is my presentation framework. Like, although we talk about corruption, we may not always have a very clear idea of what constitutes corruption. So I would like to talk about concepts and definitions. My topic is, how is it that some countries succeeded, others did not? Is it because of good governance, or is it because of ethical education? So I would like to also talk about a little bit about governance and ethical education and corruption, and then present to you an analytical framework through which we'll be looking at this issue of corruption. We'll also talk a little bit about global corruption trend, where we are now, where we are heading. And I also talk about how corruption happens in different governance environments. So that will give us some idea how far we can go in certain situations with the corruption control initiatives. We'll also give you some good case examples. There are examples where countries were very corrupt, only maybe 10, 20 years ago, and by now they have significantly reduced corruption. How did they do it? What happened in those countries? Then we'll discuss a little bit about lessons that we learned from all these examples that we'll discuss, and way forward. Where do we go from here? We will do that. I'll try and do all these probably in the next half an hour or so, and it's not going to be easy. You see, in the mid-70s, there was this All-American University Convention held in Los Angeles. There are all these professors from all over the US came, and they started talking about their own universities, how great that they were. So when the professor from the Yale University came to give a speech, he basically cautioned his audience, saying that he's going to speak half an hour each on the deep meanings contained in each of the words of Yale. That means Y for youth, A for adulthood, L for learning, and E for education. And after Professor has finished his speech, after 2 hours, leaving his audience completely exhausted and tired, the chairperson stood up and inspired the audience, saying that they should be lucky to think that the professor did not come from the University of Massachusetts. The way we define corruption, because corruption has various forms and shapes and structures, etc. So there are various people who have looked at it in various ways, and none of this particular definition is actually the complete explanation of corruption. Some sees it like Ney as a behavioral concept, that is a behavioral issue. that when people deviate from the norm set up to operate in certain ways, and then